Thank you for being here. I'm very excited and passionate about this series to really let people know why macrobiotics is so unique and more important than ever now than it has been in the past. And I'm also very excited that we have so many people participating, also from many different countries. We have participants from Canada, France, the UK, Lebanon, Italy, Argentina, Germany, Portugal, and of course from the US. So welcome everyone. And for people who might not know me, that basically I'm a macrobiotic counselor. I guide people in their macrobiotic practice, and also together with my wife Susan, we run the Strengthening Health Institute, where our mission really is to educate people in the macrobiotic diet and lifestyle, and also to preserve and to disseminate the uniqueness of macrobiotics and our unique style. Then we wrote the ultimate guide to eating for longevity, which is basically a record of my life and experience with macrobiotics and how we practice, and our desire to give that to as many people as possible. And we really hope it'll be a household word. I wanted to talk about how I got the idea for this series. A couple of years ago, a few years ago, I was in San Diego, and I wanted to reconnect with an MD friend who I hadn't seen in many years. And we were talking, and he said, macrobiotics has outlived its importance. It's really no longer necessary because of the vegan and vegetarian movements that are becoming so widespread. And I said, that's interesting. My idea is completely the opposite. And I gave them the reasons why I thought macrobiotics was so unique and so important and could really add, it's like a hub, it can really bring into focus vegetarian and vegan practice and lifestyle. And also because macrobiotics, especially as we practice it, is a total lifestyle. It's far more than a diet. So tonight's topic is about indigenous and local foods. And of course, the local movement is gaining momentum all the time, but I don't know anyone who uses indigenous the way we use it in macrobiotics. Now, George Osawa is the founder of modern day macrobiotics or modern macrobiotics. And one of the ideas that Osawa based the macrobiotic diet and lifestyle on is a Japanese concept, Shindo Fuji, which basically means our body and the earth are not two. However, my reinterpretation, since I have to reinterpret everything, my reinterpretation is that we are one and inseparable from nature and the environment. I'll say it again. We are one and inseparable from nature and the environment. Now, why is food so important in macrobiotics? Well, the answer is the earth produces food, and when we eat our natural foods, which are plant-based foods, when we eat our natural foods, we make a direct connection to the environment. But the problem is, since the 14th century, since trading and conquering, everything has been, confused in most countries. Basically, trading and conquering destroyed local foods, local practices, brought tropical and subtropical foods and spices and sugar into temperate climatic regions. And it's not only foods, it's cooking styles, it's plants, it's everything. And, many years ago when Fukuoka, who wrote the book One Straw Revolution, was in Boston, and he took a group and we walked around Brookline, and he said, this is not indigenous, that's not indigenous. Basically, there's almost nothing in Brookline, Massachusetts that was indigenous. It was almost all tropical vegetation. And as you probably know, tropical foods are taking over. Well, is that a problem? Well, from the macrobiotic point of view, it is a problem because food grows according to the locality. Now, you could say lots of tropical foods grow here now. However, tropical foods, let me backtrack. If you're familiar with yin and yang, it probably makes more sense. We say that yang is adaptable and yin is not. Now, why is that? Well, normally when I teach, I have my whiteboard or my flip chart, blackboard, and I can do my diagrams. So if you think of a spiral, a logarithmic spiral, think of a snail shell where you can see that perfect logarithmic spiralic pattern. So a spiral is moving from the periphery to the center and becoming more and more tightly wrapped as it gets into the center, which means change happens much more quickly and easily at the center than it does at the periphery. The movement is very slow. Think about, draining your bathtub. Around the periphery, you see almost no movement until you get just down to the drain. But around the drain, even from the beginning, you see active movement. Change happens in the center of the spiral, not in the periphery very easily. So the periphery is yin, the center is yang, which means things that originate in a temperate climatic region are adaptable and adapt and change quickly, whereas things that originate in the tropics do not. For example, many people are familiar with kabocha or Hokkaido pumpkin. Hokkaido pumpkin originated in around Amherst, Massachusetts. And a professor from Japan who was teaching loved those pumpkins, those winter squash, and took the seeds back. And in there, in Hokkaido, they adapted into Hokkaido pumpkin. Well, if you take the seeds from Hokkaido pumpkin and you plant them here, you get Hokkaido pumpkins. If you take the seeds you harvest from those squash and you plant them next year, you get similar to Hokkaido pumpkin. But if you plant those seeds again in the third year, they revert back to the New England squash. In 3 years, they've totally adapted. The problem is, like nightshades, potatoes, tomatoes, eggplants, that came from the tropics, they take many, many hundreds of years to adapt to the climate. Back in the 80s, when Miso asked me to help establish macrobiotic dietary guidelines for Eastern Europe, then he created the definition, foods that have grown safely or been used safely somewhere for 500 years. Then people say, well, what about potatoes? What about nightshades? They've been here longer than 5 years. So he said, okay, let's change the definition to 1,000 years. Well, whether it's 500 or 1,000 doesn't matter so much. The point is, foods from the tropics take a long time to adapt. Now, the really important point is country of origin, no matter what it is. And not only country of origin, the exact point that's most important is latitude where a food developed. The reason for that, the latitude determines how we receive the sun. All life develops, all life moves according to the sun's movement. What's happening this time of the year? By mid-August, we know summer's over. We start to think about fall. Why? The sun is getting lower in the sky. The angle of the sun is changing. So I've taught around the world. So I live in Philadelphia, around 39 degrees north. And when I went to teach in Valencia, 39 degrees north. Lisbon, around 39 degrees north. Kyoto, all around the same. So you can go around the world. Someone asked me recently, is it okay to eat umeboshi plums here on the East Coast? I said, of course. It's the same latitude, same climate as Japan. We're talking about latitude because that's how we receive the sun's energy, the sun's light, which nourishes plants to grow. So in any case, to define what latitudes, 26 degrees north, so we're talking about the northern hemisphere, 26 degrees north begins the subtropics, or somewhere around Key West, right? 23.5 degrees north is where the tropics actually begin. Now, a lot of people will say, okay, it's the summer, it's hot, so it should be okay to eat tropical foods during the summer. Well, actually, it's really not because, well, I can't say it's not. Quantity and quality change everything. If you don't eat much, you eliminate them. But this is the wrinkle. A season is 3 months. So let's say, okay, I'm going to eat plenty of tropical foods in June, July, and August. Okay, 3 months. Now our blood changes in 4 months. That means your red blood cells, your blood was influenced. So August, September, October, November, December. That means in August and September, you're still fine, but October, the weather's getting colder. November and December, the weather turns cold. Well, what happens when the weather is cold outside and we have these yin tropical foods in our blood? What happens is they're driven deep inside and they weaken our organs, our nervous system, our immunity. They become much more acidified. So it's really not okay to eat tropical foods in the temperate climatic region, except for, small amounts. It's fine because then we eliminate them through our activity in the sun. We had our vacation last year, our healthy vacation in Costa Rica. And in Costa Rica, then, okay, in the tropics, when you eat tropical foods, it opens you up, it aligns you to that environment. Tropical fruit, fruits are wonderful there. And even though I'm not a huge fruit eater, I, enjoy them every day there for breakfast, as many people do. Okay. So, but I knew not to overdo it, not to eat too much. Now, many people, so foods that are popular here, bananas, coconut, cashews, all tropical. And I've noticed, basically what I do, I observe what people do over long periods of time. I've noticed people with certain health problems gravitate towards those foods. And I started to observe over many years, when you eat tropical foods in a temperate climatic region, and I'm not saying here and there, when you eat a lot of them, regularly eat them, they block our body's ability to eliminate the excess. In order to be healthy, two things are important. One, what goes in? Your diet, your activity, even your attitudes. What goes in to create our health in our life? Equally as important is our body to eliminate, detoxify, release what it doesn't need. Tropical foods in a temperate climatic region interfere with our body's ability to eliminate, especially from our reproductive organs and digestive system, intestines, from the lower organs. So try to be careful. Now, in macrobiotics, Susan and I have relaxed the recommendations over a number of years, and through our experience, out of all tropical foods, tomatoes are the least harmful of the nightshades, especially vine-ripened tomatoes. So we recommend when the tomatoes grow locally in your region, then they're fine to enjoy fresh, and the rest of the year you can cook them. Potatoes, eggplants, and peppers are not the same. It's not easy for our body to eliminate those foods. And they also have longer standing effects on people's health. So the point I'm trying to make is, first and foremost, try to choose foods that are indigenous to your climate, because what happens is when you eat those foods primarily, then you make a direct connection to where you live, which has two important consequences. One, you feel very comfortable and very aligned seasonally and to the weather. The second is you much more intuitively and naturally learn what you really need and when it's okay and when it's not okay. This comes from eating indigenous foods. This is my personal experience, and also in talking to other people who follow these patterns. Now, Local is also very important, but we need guidelines for local. Of course, with everything, as close to home as possible, but certain things don't really need to be. For example, again, we use the principle of yin and yang. Yang things are more adaptable than yin things. So sea salt, we can eat anywhere from the same hemisphere. We don't want to cross hemispheres because the spiralic charge is opposite in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. It's clockwise, counterclockwise in the northern and clockwise in the southern. So with sea salt, we don't want to, cross the equator. Anywhere, sea salt, anywhere from the northern hemisphere is fine. Seaweed is the same. And these foods will store longer than anything else. After that, then we have the strong pickled and fermented foods like miso, shoyu, which is natural soy sauce, umeboshi. Those foods can be eaten from, pretty much the same hemisphere. However, once we get to grains, more local is better, which means grains you can eat anywhere from the country you live. You could even get grains from another country. Not ideal, as long as they're within a similar latitude. So the temperate region runs from 26 degrees north to 50 degrees. So from the bottom of Miami up to the lower edges of Canada around the world to, as far north as London, let's say. That's, the tropical region. Beans you should get from the same continent that you live in, also with regard to latitude. However, once we get to vegetables, we should try to keep within a couple hundred miles. The closer, the better. Because, okay, I live in Philly. If you go to Boston, 300 miles away, the climate is very, very different. If you go to Georgia, the climate is very different. Even 100 miles north and south, it really starts to change. So if you keep your vegetables within 100 miles, 200 miles, you're really better. Fruits, as local as possible. What I recommend, what we do ourselves, and what we recommend to others is to eat the fruits that grow in your locality, fruits that are sold at your local farmer's market. That's our guide. And even if they're not completely organic. So some of the farmers around here have what they call integrative pest management, where they use chemicals when needed that are not harmful. So we choose things that when we're satisfied with the growing practices of the farmers, even if they're not completely organic, when they're local and in season. And I think that is, really the best. Now, what's more fragile than anything else? And the answer is water. Water is very, the most fragile and should be as local as possible. If you take water from even, another state, it's very, very different, very, very different. So unless you can find local spring water, when I started practicing macrobiotics, we used to go out to Radnor, not far from where I lived, with our big 5-gallon bottles in our van, and we used to get local spring water. But then they stopped that tap because the water became contaminated. And I don't know anywhere where you can just go and get local spring water that's really safe to drink. It's not contaminated with pollutants or bacteria. So for that reason, we've changed to filtered water. And we've used Berkey water filter with the arsenic and fluoride filter. And more recently, we've changed to a whole house filter, which basically does the same thing. But my recommendation is use filtered water, not reverse osmosis, to use your local water and to purify it so it's good for drinking. When we put in our whole house symptom, the gentleman who came to install it for us showed us that the level of chlorine in our wonderful Philadelphia water is about the same as it is in a swimming pool. So if I wasn't turned off by the smell and taste, the sight of seeing it match up with the swimming pool was the final thing that convinced me. But the other thing is about preservation. Young foods are not much affected by preservation. So if you freeze grains, beans, or fish, they're not affected much. You can freeze bread, frozen, unused to sourdough bread. It's not easy to get, so we buy it, we freeze it. You can freeze tempeh, you can freeze natto to preserve it. Grains, beans, and fish are not affected much. But the more yin, then vegetables are affected somewhat more. Fruits are more affected, and water is the most affected. So even if you could get your beautifully pure spring or well water, taste it, how delicious it is, freeze it, put in your freezer, clean freezer, make ice cubes, throw them out and taste them. It tastes horrible. So choose indigenous first, then second is as local as possible, but the more yin, the more perishable, the more fragile. So for example, apples are harder and they store, so you have much more latitude with apples than you do with, berries or grapes that are very fragile and very, very perishable. So I hope those guidelines help. And I really don't know anyone else, who uses these kind of guidelines, because you can eat organic foods, you can eat plant-based foods, but if you combine it with a lifestyle and good eating habits and with principles that help you get the most out of your food, I think you're going to see that you'll have even a much greater degree of health than you would otherwise. Now, before we go into the questions that people submitted, I also wanted to call your attention to, we're doing a full conference. It's going to be an international conference of Macrobiotic Superstars. It's the first one, and because we couldn't do our full residential, we decided to do this, and it'll be October 15th to the 18th, and hopefully the announcement will go out tomorrow with the details. So it's something that I think you'll really want to look into. So now to the questions, and please feel free to submit questions for our next webinar. So number one, living in the South where okra and Malabar spinach and summer squash grow abundantly all summer, do I need to limit or avoid these foods in favor of more cool climate veggies like cabbage, carrots, etc.? Well, again, okra and Malabar spinach are tropical, which means enjoy them a little bit in the summer, just don't overdo them. Summer squash is wonderful. It's a wonderful summer vegetable. So any type of summer squash, yellow squash is probably the best, but also zucchini, especially small and baby zucchini, we've added to the okay list. Then when local farmers have melons and grapes right now, or whatever fruit they have where anyone lives, should we stop eating summer fruit in mid-August? And the answer is no. Just start to lessen them, go overboard. So when the food first starts to appear, in May and, June, July, up to mid-August, you can be totally relaxed with fruit. I mean, I don't know, eat to your heart's content, depends on what that means, but you can eat a fair amount of fruit because of the heat and the sun, you're eliminating it. But as I already said, now the weather's starting to cool, the sun's starting to go down, we don't have the same ability to eliminate fruit. So for example, if you eat ice cream in the hot summer, it's very different from eating it in the cold winter. So I'm not advocating ice cream, I'm just trying to show a principle. If we eat cold foods and fruits, liquidy fruits in the summer, when the sun is intense, we eliminate them a lot. We start to lose that ability at the end of the summer, and we lose it a lot in the winter. We don't have that ability. Okay. So then, is it okay to use an electric coffee maker and drink organic coffee? Well, okay. Of course, gas is always best, but yeah, an electric coffee maker is fine. Organic coffee is best because coffee is quite chemicalized. But the really important thing is drip coffee. You want the coffee to go through a paper filter because the particles in the oils are the harmful part. They concentrate, like in a French press, they concentrate. Whereas in the filtered coffee, the paper filter especially catches those particles and oils as much as possible. However, whatever you put in coffee messes it up. There's nothing healthy you can put in coffee or tea. So I can't say that coconut milk or soy milk or almond milk, and any milks, whatever, are better or okay in coffee. Which means if you enjoy coffee, the best is having a nice cup in the morning, filtered organic coffee, pure black, nothing in it whatsoever. Next question was about Konyaku, Konyaku. It's a Japanese yam starch paste. There's white Konyaku and black. Black kombu means it has kombu powder in it. The Japanese say kombu cleans sand out of your belly, but what it means it is Konyaku has the ability to clean out your digestive system. And it's one of those weird foods you can get in an Asian market. And either you love it or you don't. It has a very rubbery consistency, kind of strange smell. But it's one of those foods, if you love it, you absolutely love it. It's good cooked in soup. And I happen to be a Konyaku lover. I can eat it all the time. So if you have a taste for it or you want to try it, cut it up in thin slices like matchsticks and cook it in miso soup or shoyu soup. Give it a try. Okay, the next question is about inspiration. Help someone's partner. I don't know what to say, really what's inspirational, but health is not a discipline. Diet is not a discipline. It's not a chore. Shopping and cooking are the discipline. My experience is health craves health in every sense of the word. So if your partner or kids or whoever or friends are resistant, if they're willing to eat any healthy food, let them eat that. Because one healthy food creates a taste for another. And without saying anything negative or trying to restrict, let nature and time run its course. So I think if you introduce foods that people like, that are healthy, then it helps your appetite to adapt and adjust. And they get to enjoy those foods, and then they start to choose them. Is red miso paste from Miso Master okay at this time of the year? Basically, you can use red miso, barley miso, brown rice miso, white miso, if it's naturally made in this country or in Japan year-round. So, and the best way to use miso is in soup, any type of soup. Then the next question. The macrobiotic diet recommends a high fiber diet, mainly brown rice and millet. For those of us who are gluten sensitive, what can we substitute for high gluten grains? Well, I've tried to answer this in many different ways, but okay, my answer that I like the best, George Osawa fashioned macrobiotic cooking after Japanese temple cooking, because Japanese monks have a history of health and vitality and longevity. They were strong and vital. And they're vegan. And one of the things that they did, and they engaged in intense physical activity, little sleep, exposure to the elements. One of the things they did is they used a lot of gluten, especially from seitan, boiled wheat gluten, and fu, baked wheat gluten. And what I discovered, because the protein of the wheat when cooked becomes very strengthening, as much as animal foods, and gluten has another property. It activates the immune system. which means if you come from an unhealthy diet or you have an unhealthy liver or digestive system, and you eat the gluten grains that cause a symptom. My question is that symptom unhealthy? The answer is no, it's uncomfortable, and there's a big difference. So a healthy person can eat the healthy foods from around the world, and the gluten grains, especially barley and wheat, and the ancient ones, farro and spelt, are among the healthiest foods. They change your macrobiotic practice and your health and vitality. So I would say, unless you have celiac disease, unless you've been diagnosed with celiac disease, little by little reintroduce healthy gluten. Cook brown rice with barley or wheat or farro. Start to eat barley, have barley miso soup. Little by little, reintroduce healthy gluten products systematically so they cause either no or small symptoms. And over time, you redevelop your ability to eat the gluten grains. Now, there's unhealthy gluten, donuts and cookies and cakes and pastries. You want to avoid those. But the healthy gluten products, once you've reacquired your ability to eat those, you'll be happy for it. And I'm speaking from experience of people who've attended our programs when they're all on site, and everyone who was highly gluten sensitive left enjoying gluten products healthfully. So I think it's time to draw this to an end. I want to thank you for being here. Help us, spread the word on why macrobiotics is so unique and wonderful. Bye now. Good night.